Fancy intro today on the May 15th, 2025 edition of Brandon's World. Because earlier this week, I had said that friend of the show, Jalen Sandvik, was going to come on today's show. That was pre-recorded last Saturday, but me and Jalen decided to dump that podcast because the material would be too old because of what transpired on Tuesday night with my Cleveland Cavaliers being officially eliminated from the postseason. So we will catch up with Jalen at a later date when we get to the NBA Finals. Today, I just want to talk about Cavs Pacers, Knicks Celtics, Nuggets Thunder, and I guess T-Wolves Warriors, though that series is over. Golden State is in a very precarious situation. Obviously, the Steph Curry injury. Golden State fans, you can make the argument that maybe it is a series that Steph Curry is still in it. Though Minnesota has now dispatched the Lakers in five. They dispatched the Golden State in five, and they are now awaiting the winner of the Thunder Nuggets series, which, for the record, I am again not rooting for anybody. I still think Nikola Jokic is the best player in the world. I love watching him play. I think the Thunder are the best team left. I think as a sports fan, I think we should all root for Denver tonight to get that series to a game seven. We could get the 2023 defending world champion Denver Nuggets against the best team in basketball all year long, the team with the best depth, but they'd be a young team at home in a game seven. Could they handle the pressure? It would be absolutely fascinating sports theater. I could make the argument, same thing about Boston and New York, and I got to tell you something. Now, with Jason Tatum being out, and obviously all the Celtics guys last night rallying around him, playing big, though it does feel like almost like the Rockets Warriors situation, like you knew Houston was going to blow out Golden State. Golden State wanted to end Houston on their home floor in game six. They just could not do that. I do wonder if the Knicks want to end the Celtics on their home court in MSG on Friday night. If they do not do that and that series gets to a game seven, and God forbid for Knicks fans, the Boston Celtics do come back without Jason Tatum and win that series, what an indictment it may be on Jason Tatum's legacy. Everybody's talking about the injury may enhance Jason Tatum's legacy. But what if the Celtics come back down 3-1 and beat the Knicks? And what if they get back? I'm not even saying win the championship, but what if they beat the Indiana Pacers like they did last year and they get back to the NBA Finals? Now, without Tatum, I don't know if they could beat in Oklahoma City or a Denver, which, for the record, whoever wins that series, I am predicting will win the NBA championship. I think we are watching the NBA Finals, which is why I said I hope that series does get to a game seven, because we all know the NBA Finals hasn't seen one since 2016. But as I mentioned at the top of this broadcast, you guys know I am from Northeast Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio. You guys know I am a Cleveland Cavaliers fan. And I was shouting from the rooftop when the Cavs started off, what was it, 15-0, something like that. They had three separate 12-13 game winning streaks on the season. I said this was the best team in basketball. And I cannot explain how the Cavs went from defeating the Miami Heat, who, yes, the Miami Heat did not deserve to be a playoff team. I think, if anything, this postseason is teaching us a lot about the NBA playoff structure. One, that the play-in tournament is absolutely pointless. We should not have eight seeds. You could really cut it down to six. The other being the fact that obviously now with the Jason Tatum injury, the Steph Curry injury, the stuff that did go on in Cleveland with Darius Garland and Evan Mobley, you could make a case that these playoff series need to be shorter and that we need to give more urgency to these games and that we need to give players more rest later on in the postseason, conference finals, NBA finals, as opposed to first and second round. But nonetheless, uh, you know, I don't know how this Cavs team went from destroying the Miami Heat in round one by a literal record margin. No one had ever won a series 4-0 by the amount of points the Cavs did, to getting absolutely embarrassed off the floor, could not recover from that game 2 Tyrese Alburn buzzer beater in Cleveland, which set the tone. Game 4, Indiana just came out and absolutely splashed Cleveland. Game 5, my Cavaliers came out with a fight in the first quarter. They got up 19 points, and then for whatever reason, they could not score the ball down the stretch. Donovan Mitchell was on one leg. They refused to give the ball to Evan Mobley. Jared Allen only had one rebound after the end of the first quarter in Game 5, seven total rebounds in the last two games of the series, and really not out there for the last few minutes of the game, which to me shows the hand of Kenny Atkinson and where his trust is at with Jared Allen. And what has bothered, and I'll tell you this because again, I live in the Cleveland area. I don't listen a lot to sports talk radio here in Cleveland because, quite frankly, the callers and the fans of this area are a bunch of idiots and don't know anything about sports. But I will tell you the general sentiment around here is that the Cavs are just a soft basketball team, and either Darius Garland, Jared Allen, or both have to go. Now, because of the NBA's CBA restrictions they put in a few years ago to sort of stop tanking, a lot like they did with the new NBA draft lottery odds, it's really hard to trade big salaries, which obviously Darius Garland, Jared Allen both have. You get yourself financially strapped. There's some sort of hard cap on it where, like, if a guy like LeBron, who by the way, I don't think is coming here, but obviously Cleveland fans are fantasizing LeBron coming here for a third time because he is absolutely what the Cavs need, and he has been what the Cavs have needed for the past couple of seasons. Would have to sign here for the minimum, even if they do trade Garland and Allen, because a trade of Garland and Allen, the salaries would have to match. So, listen, the Cavs need to figure this out. I think the good news for them is that obviously, as we talked about, Boston may not be as good next year without Jason Tatum. So you're looking at a Knicks team who I think, even if they make the NBA Finals this year, will have overachieved, and I don't think they're as good as they think they are. Indiana, I sort of feel the same way. I've said, could this Pacers team be like the 2004 Detroit Pistons that had Chauncey Billups, Rip Hamilton, Rasheed Wallace, Ben Wallace, Tayshaun Prince, a team that does not have one Hall of Famer on it, but just a very good, solid basketball team that could go on and win a championship? Theoretically, yes. Does Tyrese Alburn rise in that superstar level? You cannot deny now that Indiana has made two Eastern Conference Finals in back-to-back years. I still don't think of him as a top 5 guard in the sport. I like Pascal Siakam as a player. I like Miles Turner as a player. I don't think either of them are number ones, and quite frankly, I don't know if either of them are number twos on championship teams because even in Toronto, it was Kawhi Leonard, Kyle Lowry, and then Pascal Siakam. So, Indiana, they have more depth, I think, than I originally thought. Obviously, Benedict Margarine, Obi Toppin, Andrew Nemhard, Neesmith, TJ McConnell. They can just throw a lot of different bodies at you. And when they shoot the ball well, and they do what they do. They obviously are a tough team to guard. Now, I think Boston may be more talented than Cleveland or would have been in terms of bench depth, which is the reason why Boston was able to take them out in 4 games last year. But all those games were close, and Tyrese Haliburton did not play mostly in the series, and Boston had Tatum and they had Jaylen Brown. So I don't know. It may be a matchup thing, right? Like Minnesota's a good matchup against Denver. We'll see if that rings true again this year, if that's the matchup we get. The Knicks seem to be a good matchup for them against Indiana because they took them to 7 games last year without Julius Randle, Josh Hart on one leg, Jalen Brunson hurt. So I don't know. These NBA players are strange. We've obviously seen a lot of victories by the road team, especially here in the second round. I said that something catastrophic would have to happen for Cleveland and Boston not to meet in the ECF, and that's exactly what happened. In my opinion, Jason Tatum getting hurt, and for Cleveland, the injuries are not an excuse. Darius Garland being hurt is not an excuse. I've said multiple times, I would love to move off Darius Garland. I don't know how you do it. I think the Cavs need to get a bigger shooting guard and have Donovan Mitchell be your Steph Curry like scorer at the point, and you need his Klay Thompson. You need a 6'6", 6'7" catch and shoot defensive guard who can also be one of your best perimeter defenders. You need to upgrade the bench. As much as I think Max Strus can be a very good player on some nights, also some nights he disappears. I would love to move on from Max Strus at this point. I don't think it's possible. I obviously want to move on from an Isaac Okoro. I don't know if that's possible. So, Denver stayed patient with their core. They ended up winning a championship. Boston made some moves. They bring in Drew Holiday. They bring in Kristaps Porzingis. That's how they win the championship. I'm just wondering what Cleveland sees as a big potential move. Again, I don't know if Evan Mobley's ready to play the five full time, but this is the third straight year that Jared Allen has been completely soft in the postseason. So can you trust him? Um, Cleveland is just in a weird, difficult spot. And Knicks Pacers for the last ever series on TNT does seem kind of fitting, obviously, because of the Reggie Miller element of calling the game and the old school rivalry throwback to when they were on NBC. But it does feel like a series that outside of Jalen Brunson, at least to me, because I don't think of Karl Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges as stars either. It does feel like a series that just lacks stars and it's a bunch of good role players and a series to where whoever wins will get the right to lose in the NBA Finals. So if you're Anthony Edwards in Minnesota, you probably prefer Denver because you know you can beat them. I think Minnesota, Oklahoma City, those two young teams would be a changing of the guard, sort of Anthony Edwards, SGA, who's the face of the week, especially out west, if you will, type series. Minnesota being the sixth seed, if they win the championship, they would be the first ever, excuse me, they'd be the second ever, right behind the Houston Rockets in 1995, to be the sixth seed. And similarly, that Rockets team got off to a slow start and got hot at season's end. So, could we see some parallel there? I don't know. But we're going to get a 3 and a 4 seed. We're going to get either a 1 and a 4 against a 6 in NBA history. Only two teams not being a number 3 seed or higher have won the NBA championship. So there you go. And with that, I'm going to go in and conclude today's Brandon's World. Like that clip from the Brandon's World podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brandon's World podcast right here on YouTube.